The crisp, Icelandic wind carried secrets across the black sand beach as Emma Watson stood at the edge of the North Atlantic. At 35, the former child star had vanished from public view 6 months ago. No social media, no interviews, no appearances. The world wondered why Hollywood's most outspoken advocate had gone silent. Behind her, a small cottage perched on volcanic rock housed her grandmother's weathered journal, a stack of increasingly disturbing letters, and a decision that would reshape her life. In her hand, she clutched a final letter, its words more threatening than all the others. The isolation that had initially felt like prison now wrapped around her like armor. What could drive one of the world's most beloved actresses to abandon everything and disappear to the edge of the Arctic Circle? And why was she now standing on this beach, burning the last connection to her former life? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. London's spring rain tapped gently against the windows of Emma Watson's Notting Hill townhouse. The former Harry Potter star, now an accomplished actress, UN ambassador, and feminist icon, sat in her living room surrounded by unopened scripts. At 35, Emma had grown into a woman whose intelligence and conviction had earned her as much respect as her acting talent. Her short, stylishly cut brown hair framed a face that had matured gracefully into elegant beauty, though today it was drawn with exhaustion. "I just don't understand why this one's different," sighed Thomas Harrington, Emma's agent of nearly 20 years. Tall and slender with salt and pepper hair, he paced the room with the nervous energy of a man watching commissions evaporate. "You've had obsessive fans before. Remember that boy in 2018 who camped outside your apartment in New York?" Emma rubbed her temples, feeling the familiar throb of a tension headache forming. "This isn't the same, Tom. Those letters—" She gestured toward a manila folder on the coffee table. "There's something calculated about them. Clinical. It's not just the usual 'I love you' nonsense." The folder contained 12 letters, each more disturbing than the last, each displaying an intimate knowledge of Emma's life that went beyond. Celebrity gossip magazines. They had started arriving 3 months ago, first at her agency, then her management company, and finally, most disturbingly, at her mother's home address. Thomas picked up the folder reluctantly. "Have Marcus and the security team made any progress identifying the sender?" Emma shook her head, rising to pour herself a cup of tea from the porcelain pot on the sideboard. The delicate china had been her grandmother's, a woman she had barely known but whose memory loomed large in family stories. "Nothing conclusive. The letters come from different locations each time. The paper is common. The printer, ink, untraceable. And the police say they can't do anything until there's an explicit threat." She returned to her seat, cradling the teacup. "Apparently, detailed descriptions of my daily routines and creepy poetry about my porcelain skin don't qualify." Thomas sat down across from her, his expression softening with genuine concern. "Emma, I've known you since you were 15. I've never seen you this rattled. What aren't you telling me?" Emma's gaze drifted to the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. For a moment, she was that little girl again, riding the Hogwarts. Express for the first time, life stretching before her with infinite possibility. How strange that 2 decades later she would feel more exposed than ever. "The last letter mentioned Anna," she said quietly, referring to her mother. "It described the interior of her home in Oxford. The color she painted her kitchen last month." Emma's voice wavered slightly. "It mentioned how she always wears Dad's old cardigan when she gardens on Sunday mornings." Thomas paled. "Christ! Someone is watching my mother, Tom. Someone who knows things they shouldn't." Emma set down her cup with a decisive clink. "Marcus is arranging additional security for her, but I won't put her at risk." "So, what are you proposing? A security upgrade at both properties? A temporary relocation, perhaps?" Emma shook her head, her decision already made. I need to disappear for a while. Disappear? Thomas laughed nervously. Emma, you're one of the most recognizable women in the world. You can't just... I've already cleared my schedule for the next 3 months. The UN work can be done remotely. Everything else can wait. Thomas stared at her, his expression cycling through disbelief, frustration, and finally resignation. Where would you even go? Every resort, every exclusive location, they all leak to the press eventually. Emma rose and crossed to a small antique secretary desk in the corner. From a drawer, she withdrew a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. My grandmother's, she explained, returning to sit beside Thomas. Mom gave it to me after Dad's funeral last year. I've been reading it, trying to feel connected to them both, I suppose. She opened the journal carefully. My grandmother wasn't originally from England. During the war, when she was just a girl, her family fled to Iceland. They lived in a tiny fishing village on the eastern coast, so remote it wasn't even on most maps. Emma traced her finger over the faded handwriting. She wrote about it like it was the edge of the world, but also the only place she ever felt truly safe. Thomas frowned. Iceland? Emma, really? I've already looked into it. The village still exists. Fewer than 200 people. No tourist industry to speak of. Just fishing and a small arts collective that was established in the 1970s. Her eyes lit with conviction. And I own property there. You what? My grandmother's family cottage. It passed to my father, then to me. I've never seen it, but according to the local council it's still standing and habitable. Emma closed the journal gently. No one would think to look for me there. Thomas sighed heavily, recognizing the determined set of Emma's jaw that had become familiar over their long association. And how exactly do you propose to travel to this remote Icelandic village without being spotted? Private jets file flight plans. Commercial flights have passenger manifests that leak. A small, secretive smile played at Emma's lips. Marcus has a plan. The less you know, the better. Emma, I need this, Tom. Not just because of the letters. I've been in the public eye since I was 9 years old. 26 years without a moment's true privacy. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. Don't you ever wonder what it would be like to just disappear? To be nobody for a while? Before Thomas could answer, Emma's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her expression tightening. It's Marcus. He's outside. Thomas stood reluctantly. How long, Emma? Really? 3 months, maybe more. I don't know yet. She walked him to the door. The studio can announce I'm taking a sabbatical to write my book. It's not even a lie. I've been putting it off for too long anyway. At the door, Thomas turned to her with the protective concern of a longtime friend rather than an agent. Promise me you'll stay in touch. Secure channels only, but regular check-ins. Of course. Emma embraced him quickly. Thank you for understanding. After Thomas left, Emma returned to the living room and picked up her grandmother's journal again. She'd read it cover to cover 3 times now, trying to picture the wild Icelandic landscape through her grandmother's young eyes. A landscape of black sand beaches, towering cliffs, and isolation so complete it could swallow a person whole. Exactly what she needed. Her doorbell rang, announcing Marcus Williams' arrival. Tall, broad-shouldered, with close-cropped gray hair, and the watchful eyes of his former intelligence career, Marcus had been Emma's security consultant for 5 years. He entered without ceremony, his gaze automatically scanning the room before settling on her. The car is ready, he said simply. We need to move quickly. Are your bags packed as I instructed? Emma nodded, gesturing to a single carry-on suitcase and a backpack near the door. 1 bag, under 20 pounds, nothing designer or recognizable. Good. Marcus nodded approvingly. The less we take, the fewer questions at borders. Did you dispose of the phone I mentioned? Yes. this is the new one." She held up a basic smartphone. No accounts, no social media, no email, just the secure messaging app you installed. "Excellent." He checked his watch. "The first car will take us to a private airfield outside the city. From there, we fly to Edinburgh under different names. In Edinburgh, we switch to another charter to Reykjavik. Final leg is by helicopter to a location 30 miles from your village. Local transport from there." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Complicated." "Necessarily so. Each leg uses different documentation and payment methods. If anyone is tracking you, the trail goes cold in multiple places." He studied her face. "Are you absolutely certain about this, Emma? There are secure locations much closer to home." "I'm sure." She picked up her grandmother's journal and carefully placed it in her backpack. "Iceland is exactly what I need." Marcus nodded, not one to argue once decisions were made. "I'll stay with you for the first week to establish security protocols and ensure the property is safe. After that, I'll withdraw to Reykjavik but remain on call." "Thank you, Marcus." Emma took one last look around her home. The carefully selected artwork, the shelves of beloved books, the photographs of family and friends. How strange to think she would be trading all this comfort for a rustic cottage in the Icelandic wilderness. "I'm ready." The journey unfolded exactly as Marcus had planned, a carefully choreographed series of transportation changes, each designed to obscure their ultimate destination. By the time their helicopter touched down on a makeshift landing pad near the Hiua small fishing village of Hrafnsfjörður, Emma felt as though she had shed her celebrity skin entirely. The landscape that greeted her seemed to belong to another world. Jagged mountains rose dramatically from the sea, their peaks disappearing into low-hanging clouds. The late spring air carried a brittle chill that cut through her layers of clothing. Below, nestled in a sheltered inlet, the village appeared as a cluster of colorful buildings, reds, blues, and yellows standing defiantly against the stark backdrop. Their final leg of transport was a weather-beaten Land Rover driven by a taciturn local who asked no questions and offered no conversation. Emma watched the rugged coastline pass by, feeling both apprehension and a strange sense of homecoming. Her grandmother's words from the journal echoed in her mind. "In Iceland, the land itself keeps your secrets." The cottage stood apart from the village, perched on a rocky outcropping overlooking the sea. Small and sturdy with a traditional turf roof, it had clearly been maintained over the years, though it retained an air of quiet abandonment. As Emma stepped from the Land Rover, the wind immediately caught her hair, the tang of salt sharp in her nostrils. "It's exactly as she described it," Emma whispered, reaching into her pocket to touch the journal she now carried everywhere. Marcus supervised the unloading of their few belongings while Emma approached the cottage slowly, savoring this moment of connection to her family's past. The key, sent ahead by registered mail to a secure box in Reykjavik, turned smoothly in the lock, and the door opened with only the faintest creak of protest. Inside, the cottage was simple but surprisingly comfortable. The main room combined living and dining spaces, dominated by a large stone fireplace. A small kitchen occupied one corner, while two doors presumably led to bedrooms. The furniture was sparse but sturdy, handcrafted wooden pieces that had weathered the decades with dignity. Most striking were the windows, large for such a small dwelling, that showcased the dramatic seascape beyond. Emma moved toward one, mesmerized by the hypnotic rhythm of waves crashing against the rocks below. "Your grandmother chose well," Marcus observed, depositing their bags inside the door. "Defensible position, clear sightlines, single-access road. I couldn't have selected better myself." Emma smiled, recognizing this as high praise from her security-minded companion. She wasn't thinking of security. She was thinking of beauty. Marcus shrugged. Sometimes they're the same thing. Over the next week, they settled into a routine. Marcus installed discreet security measures, motion sensors at the perimeter, reinforced locks, a satellite phone for emergencies. Emma explored her new surroundings, gradually venturing from the cottage into the village itself. Ravensfjordur proved to be even smaller than she had imagined. A single main street lined with essential services. A combination post office and general store, a modest community center, a small cafe, and a handful of fishing-related businesses. The locals regarded her with polite curiosity but maintained a respectful distance. Whether they recognized her or not, they seemed to understand her desire for privacy. On her 6th day, as she browsed the limited selection at the general store, Emma noticed an elderly woman watching her from across the room. Tall and straight-backed despite her years, with a thick silver braid wrapped around her head like a crown, the woman exuded a quiet dignity. When their eyes met, the woman nodded once, then approached with deliberate steps. "You are Eliza's granddaughter," she stated in accented English. Not a question, but a declaration. Emma blinked in surprise. Eliza, her grandmother's name. "Yes," she admitted. "How did you know?" The woman's weathered face creased in a smile. The eyes. Eliza had those same eyes, like seeing the ocean in a storm. She extended a work-roughened hand. "I am Margaret Jonsdottir. Your grandmother and I were girls together during the war." Emma felt a surge of emotion as she clasped the offered hand. Here, unexpectedly, was a living connection to the grandmother she had never known. "Emma Watson, I'm very pleased to meet you." Margaret nodded, apparently unimpressed by Emma's fame. "You are staying at the old Carlson place, your family's cottage." "Yes, I only recently learned of its existence. It has stood empty too long." Margaret's keen eyes studied Emma's face. "You are hiding from something." Emma stiffened. "I'm taking some time away, that's all." "It is the same thing." Margaret shrugged. "Iceland is good for hiding. The winters are long, but they teach patience. The summers are brief, but they teach appreciation." She gestured to Emma's basket containing basic provisions. "Your grandmother used to say no one should face an Icelandic evening without proper tea. Come to my house tomorrow afternoon. I will show you how it is done properly." Before Emma could respond, Margaret turned and walked away with the confidence of someone unaccustomed to having her invitations refused. Emma stared after her, feeling as though she'd been swept up by a force of nature disguised as an elderly woman. The next day, as Marcus prepared to depart for Reykjavik, Emma mentioned the encounter. "Margaret Jonsdottir, I've vetted all the permanent residents," he said, checking his equipment one final time. "She's legitimate. Local artist, some reputation for textile work, no red flags." "She knew my grandmother." Marcus paused, recognizing the significance. "All the more reason to cultivate the connection, then, but maintain protocols. No discussions of why you're here, no details about your travel or security arrangements, no photographs, no social media, no unnecessary communication with the outside world," Emma finished for him. "I remember the rules, Marcus." He allowed himself a rare smile. "Of course you do. You've always been my most sensible client." His expression grew serious again. "The satellite phone is for emergencies only. For routine check-ins, use the secure messaging app. I'll be 3 hours away by helicopter if needed." After Marcus departed, Emma found herself truly alone for the first time in recent memory. The cottage, cozy with a fire crackling in the stone hearth, wrapped around her like a protective shell. Outside, the relentless Icelandic wind sang its ancient song, carrying away the tension that had been her constant companion for months. That afternoon, following Margaret's directions, Emma made her way to a cheerful red house at the village's edge. Like many local buildings, it combined traditional Icelandic design with practical modernizations. Solar panels discreetly positioned alongside a traditional turf roof. Margaret welcomed her with brisk efficiency, ushering her into a home. that immediately captured Emma's imagination. Every surface displayed evidence of artistic creation: hand-woven textiles in vibrant colors, intricately carved wooden figures, and walls adorned with paintings depicting the dramatic Icelandic landscape. "You made all of this?" Emma asked, turning slowly to take in the riot of creativity. "Most," Margaret confirmed, leading her to a sitting area near a window overlooking a small garden. "The paintings are my late husband's. The carvings, my brother's work." She gestured to the textiles. "The weaving is mine. It has been the work of my life." As promised, Margaret prepared tea with ceremonial precision, explaining each step as though conveying crucial wisdom. Emma found herself captivated not just by the process but by the woman herself, someone who had lived nearly 8 decades yet maintained a fierce independence and creative drive. "Your grandmother was good with colors," Margaret remarked as they settled with their tea. "She helped me design my first major tapestry, the one hanging there." She nodded toward an intricate wall hanging depicting the village as it might have appeared decades ago. She understood how colors speak to each other. "I never knew that about her," Emma said softly. "I never knew her at all, really. She died when I was very young." Margaret nodded. "Eliza left Iceland after the war. She wrote to me for many years, then the letters became fewer. Life takes us in different directions." She studied Emma over the rim of her cup. "But something brought you here, not just curiosity about an old cottage." Emma hesitated, then decided on a partial truth. "I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere I could reset." "Ah." Margaret nodded as though this explained everything. "You have been listening to too many voices, not your own." The observation, so simple yet so accurate, caught Emma off guard. How long had it been since she'd heard her own thoughts clearly, unmediated by public expectations or professional demands? "Perhaps," she acknowledged. "Then you have come to the right place." Margaret gestured toward the window, where the ever-changing Icelandic sky painted dramatic patterns of light and shadow across the landscape. "Here, the only voices are the wind, the sea, and your own heart, if you are brave enough to listen." As Emma walked back to her cottage that evening, those words echoed in her mind. The path ahead stretched empty. 3 months of solitude in this remote place, with only her thoughts and her grandmother's journal for company. For the first time since the threatening letters began, she felt something other than fear. She felt possibility. The routine Emma established over her first 3 weeks in Hrafnsfjörður provided a comfort she hadn't expected. Each morning began with a walk along the black sand beach below her cottage. The solitude broken only by the cries of seabirds and the constant conversation of waves against shore. Afternoons were often spent in the village, cautious at first, then with growing confidence as it became clear that the locals, while aware of her identity, respected her privacy with an almost religious devotion. "We Icelanders understand the need for space," Margaret had explained during one of their regular tea sessions. "In a land so exposed to the elements, a person's inner world becomes their true shelter." Emma had found unexpected friendship with the older woman, whose blunt wisdom and artistic passion provided both comfort and stimulation. 3 times weekly, she visited Margaret's home, where she was slowly being initiated into the traditional techniques of Icelandic textile arts. "Your hands remember what your grandmother taught you," Margaret observed as Emma worked the simple loom set up in the cottage's main room. "The body carries knowledge the mind has forgotten." It was true that Emma had taken to weaving with surprising aptitude, finding meditative peace in the rhythmic movement of shuttle through warp threads. The growing textile, a simple wall hanging in blues and grays that echoed the Icelandic seascape, represented something beyond mere craft. It was evidence of healing, of reconnection with a part of herself long buried under celebrity and public service. This particular morning, Emma returned from her beach walk to find an unexpected package propped against her cottage door. Small, and neatly wrapped in brown paper, it bore no postmark or address, only her name written in an unfamiliar hand. She stood looking at it for a long moment, years of caution making her hesitant. No one knew she was here except Marcus, Thomas, and her mother. Even they didn't have her physical address, communicating only through the secure messaging app on predetermined days. Carefully, she picked up the package and brought it inside. It was light, perhaps a book or small gift. The rational part of her mind suggested it was likely a welcome gesture from someone in the village. The anxious part whispered more sinister possibilities. Emma set it on the kitchen table and sent a quick message to Marcus. Unexpected package delivered to cottage. No postmark. Advice? His response came minutes later. Do not open. Secure in isolated location. Sending local contact to retrieve. Emma sighed, knowing Marcus's caution was professional but feeling slightly foolish. This wasn't London or New York. It was a tiny Icelandic village where everyone knew everyone else's business. The package was probably traditional food or some local specialty. Still, she followed protocol, using tongs from the kitchen to place the package in a metal pot with a lid, then setting it on the stone bench outside the cottage. Within 30 minutes, a serious-looking young man arrived on a weather-beaten motorcycle, introducing himself as Marcus's local security associate. I will take it for examination, he explained in excellent English, placing the package in a specialized container. Mr. Williams requests you remain indoors until cleared. Emma complied, though she couldn't help feeling the precautions were excessive. She spent the afternoon at her loom, the familiar motion of weaving gradually calming her unsettled nerves. By evening, when her secure phone chimed with an incoming message, she had almost forgotten the morning's disruption. Package contained book of Icelandic poetry. No threats detected. Chemical and biological screening negative. Sending book with local courier tomorrow morning. Maintain vigilance. Emma smiled at Marcus's characteristic thoroughness. Tomorrow she would receive a book of poetry that had been subjected to more security screening than most diplomatic pouches. The thought was both comforting and slightly absurd. The next morning brought not only the cleared poetry book, a thoughtful gift from Daniel Olson, the fisherman's son who had recognized her during her first week but respectfully kept his distance, but also the weekly supply boat from the mainland. Emma had learned that this arrival constituted a major event in village life, bringing not just commercial goods but also mail, medicines, and news from the wider world. She joined the small crowd gathered at the harbor, enjoying her now familiar anonymity among people who had accepted her presence without fanfare. The spring air carried a hint of summer's promise, though the wind retained its characteristic bite. Emma wrapped her woolen scarf, one of Margaret's creations, more tightly, around her neck. "Good morning, Miss Watson." Emma turned to find Daniel Olson beside her, his tall frame and thoughtful expression now familiar from occasional encounters in the village. In his early 30s, Daniel had the weathered look of someone who worked outdoors, though Emma knew, from their brief conversations, that he had studied film in London before returning to help with his family's fishing business. "Good morning, Daniel. Thank you for the poetry book. It was very thoughtful." He nodded, looking slightly embarrassed. "I remembered you mentioned wanting to learn more about Icelandic culture. Those poems capture something essential about this place." "I've already started reading it. The imagery is beautiful, even in translation." Their conversation was interrupted by commotion as the supply boat docked. The village postmaster began calling out names, distributing parcels and letters with ceremonial importance. Emma watched with interest, having sent and received nothing since her arrival. Emma Watson? The sound of her name startled her. For a moment she considered pretending not to hear, then realized how ridiculous that would seem in a gathering of barely 30 people. With Daniel at her side, she moved forward. "That's me," she confirmed, accepting a small padded envelope. "From the postmaster. Came with the priority mail, he explained. Transferred from Reykjavik yesterday. Emma studied the envelope with growing unease. It bore her name and the village address, but no return information. The handwriting was painfully familiar, the same neat, precise script that had adorned those disturbing letters in London. "Is everything all right?" Daniel asked, noting her expression. "Yes, fine," she managed, slipping the envelope into her coat pocket. Just surprised to receive anything. The walk back to her cottage passed in a blur of anxiety. How had they found her? The elaborate security measures, the carefully planned journey, the limited circle of people who knew her location, all compromised. Inside, with doors locked and curtains drawn, Emma placed the envelope on the kitchen table and stared at it. Should she call Marcus immediately? Would he insist she relocate? The thought of leaving this place that had become a sanctuary filled her with unexpected grief. Finally, using a knife, she carefully slit the envelope open, staying mindful of fingerprints as Marcus had taught her. Inside was a single sheet of high-quality stationery, folded once. With a steadying breath, she opened it. "My dearest Emma, did you think the North Atlantic would be far enough? That a remote village could hide the brightest star in the firmament? I've watched you walk the black sand each morning, your face turned toward the sea as though seeking answers in its depths. You won't find what you're looking for there. Your mother sends her love, by the way. The roses in her garden are blooming early this year. I left her a small gift on Tuesday, a book of poetry, much like the one the fisherman's son gave you. She didn't understand its significance, but you will. We'll meet soon. I've come too far to be denied now. Until then, remember that distance is merely an illusion we create to feel safe. I see you always. Yours in eternity." Gemma's hands shook so violently that the paper rattled. A wave of nausea swept through her, forcing her to sit before her legs gave way. He knew exactly where she was, what she did each day. Worse, he was still watching her mother, had approached close enough to leave something at her home. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. With fumbling fingers, she reached for her secure phone and sent an urgent message to Marcus. Letter received from stalker. Knows location, mentions mother. Need immediate assistance. While waiting for a response, Emma paced the small cottage, checking and rechecking the locks on doors and windows. The cozy space that had felt like a sanctuary now seemed exposed, its large windows potential vulnerabilities. Every shadow, every creak of the old building's frame set her nerves jangling. Marcus's reply came within minutes. Initiating security protocol. Contacting local authorities. Stay inside. Preparing extraction. Extraction. The word landed like a stone. Leaving Iceland meant admitting defeat, surrendering the peace she'd found here. Yet what choice did she have? If he'd found her here, he could find her anywhere. Emma moved to the window overlooking the sea, searching the horizon as though it might offer answers. The Icelandic landscape, so stark and beautiful, had become more than a hiding place. It had become a balm for her spirit. The thought of returning to London's constant scrutiny and pressure filled her with dread. A sharp knock at the door jolted her from these thoughts. Cautiously, she approached, calling out, "Who is it?" "It is Margaret," came the familiar voice. "Let me in, girl. We must talk." Emma hesitated only briefly before unlocking the door. Margaret entered with her usual purposeful energy, though her expression was grave. Without preamble, she said, "Daniel Olson told me about the letter. The village is concerned." "The village knows?" "Of course." Margaret removed her coat, hanging it with deliberate care. "In a place this small, there are no secrets, only things we choose not to mention." Emma sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "So everyone knows who I am and why I'm hiding?" We knew who you were the moment you arrived," Margaret confirmed, putting on the kettle as though this were any ordinary visit. "Why you came, that was your business, until now." "I've put you all in danger," Emma whispered. "If this person found me here, if he comes, pah!" Margaret made a dismissive gesture. "We are not helpless. Icelanders have survived volcanoes, famine, and 1,000 years of storms. One disturbed man does not frighten us." Despite everything, Emma felt a smile tug at her lips. Margaret's unflagging confidence was a tonic. "My security consultant is arranging for me to leave," she admitted. "It's the safest option." Margaret turned from the stove, her expression suddenly fierce. "Running again? To where? Another hiding place until he finds you there too?" "What choice do I have? Stand your ground. Face what comes." Margaret brought 2 cups of tea to the table, setting one firmly before Emma. "Your grandmother would not run." "This isn't about courage," Emma protested. "It's about safety, mine and everyone around me." "It is about both." Margaret sat across from her, eyes intense. "This man, he feeds on your fear. Each time you run, he grows stronger in his own mind." Emma stared into her tea, considering these words. There was truth in them, she knew. The endless cycle of threat and retreat couldn't continue indefinitely. "What would you have me do? Wait for him to show up at my door?" "No, but perhaps it is time to change from hunted to hunter." Before Emma could respond, her phone chimed with another message from Marcus. "Local police notified. Security team in the Nigeria. Route from Reykjavik. Earliest extraction, tomorrow morning. Maintain secure position." Emma showed the message to Margaret, who read it with a thoughtful expression. "Your man is efficient, but perhaps there is another way. Let me speak with some people in the village. Margaret, I can't involve local people in this. It's too dangerous. You did not involve us. We involved ourselves the moment we accepted you among us." Margaret rose with the dignity of her years. "When your security man arrives, listen to what he says. But remember, sometimes the strongest. Position is not retreat, but advance with allies at your side." After Margaret left, Emma spent a restless afternoon and evening waiting for updates. The security team Marcus had dispatched from Reykjavik arrived shortly before midnight. 2 serious professionals who established a perimeter around the cottage and maintained watch through the night. By morning, Marcus himself had arrived, his expression grim as he reviewed the letter and security footage from cameras that had been discreetly installed around the property. "The good news is that we've identified a potential suspect," he informed Emma as they sat at her kitchen table, the remains of a hastily prepared breakfast between them. "James Reynolds, 42, literature professor at Cambridge. He attended a literacy fundraiser where you spoke 3 years ago. Since then, he's published several academic papers that include disturbing references to you and your work." "A professor?" Emma felt a chill. Not some random obsessed fan, but an educated man with credentials and influence. "Those are often the most dangerous," Marcus noted. "They're intelligent enough to be methodical, to plan several steps ahead. They're also adept at maintaining a respectable public facade while nursing private obsessions." "How did he find me? Here?" Marcus's expression darkened. "We're still investigating that. The current theory is that he may have access to travel databases through academic connections. We're also checking for potential leaks within our own security protocols." Emma nodded, trying to process this information. "So what happens now? We leave? That's the safest option. I've arranged transport to a secure location in Norway, then onward to a private estate in Scotland where we can reassess." Emma rose and moved to the window, gazing out at the village below. In the harbor, fishing boats prepared for the day's work. Smoke rose from chimneys in the crisp morning air. This place that had been a refuge now felt like home in ways London never had. "What if I don't want to leave?" she asked quietly. Marcus joined her at the window. "Emma, I understand you found peace here, but this man has demonstrated both the resources and determination to find you. We can't guarantee your safety if you remain. Can you guarantee it anywhere?" She turned to face him. "If he found me here, he could find me in Norway or Scotland or anywhere else we run to." "Running isn't the permanent solution," Marcus acknowledged, "but it buys us time to work with authorities, to build a case for a restraining order and possibly criminal charges." "And how long will that take? Months? Years?" Emma shook her head. "I can't live my life in hiding, Marcus. I won't." "What are you suggesting?" Emma took a deep breath. "Last night, Margaret, my friend in the village, said something that's been echoing in my mind. She suggested that instead of continuing to run, perhaps it's time to change from being the hunted to being the hunter." Marcus's expression remained professionally neutral, but Emma could see the calculation in his eyes. "That's a dangerous proposition for someone without training. I'm not suggesting I confront him myself," Emma clarified, "but what if we use this situation to our advantage? If he's found me here, he'll likely make contact again. What if we're prepared for that? What if we set the terms of engagement rather than constantly reacting?" "You're talking about setting a trap," Marcus said carefully. "I'm talking about ending this, once and for all." Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded slightly. "It's unorthodox, but not without merit. If, and I emphasize if, we could control the environment, establish proper security protocols, coordinate with local authorities—" "The village would help," Emma said with certainty. "Margaret made that clear. These people have accepted me, protected my privacy. They're offering to protect me physically as well." "A community of fishermen against a determined stalker?" "A community that knows every footpath, every building, every approaching vehicle," Emma countered. "No outsider enters Hrafnsfjordur without the entire village knowing within minutes." The satellite phone on the table rang, interrupting their discussion. Marcus answered, his expression growing increasingly grave as he listened. After a terse exchange, he disconnected. "That was my contact in London," he informed Emma. "Your mother received another package this morning, more concerning than the last." Emma felt her heart constrict. "Is she all right?" "She's fine. We increased security at her home after the first incident. But the package contained photographs." Marcus hesitated. "Photographs of you. Here in Iceland. Walking on the beach. In the village. They appear to have been taken within the last week." Emma sank into a chair, her momentary confidence evaporating. "He's been here. Actually here. Watching me." "It would seem so," Marcus agreed grimly. "Then we have no choice. If he's already in Iceland, running isn't an option." Emma's voice strengthened with resolve. "We need to end this, Marcus. Here and now." Marcus considered this, his professional training warring with unconventional tactics. "If we pursue this approach, you would need to follow my instructions." "Exactly. No exceptions, no improvisations." "Agreed. And if at any point I determine the risk is unacceptable, we abort immediately and extract you." "Also agreed," Emma nodded. "So what's our first step?" Marcus pulled out his tablet and began, making notes. "First, we map the village and surrounding area, identifying every possible approach, every vulnerable point. Second, we establish a secure communications network between security personnel and trustworthy locals. Third, we create controlled conditions. That might encourage Reynolds to make contact." "You mean use me as bait," Emma said bluntly. "In the most secure manner possible," Marcus qualified. "You would appear vulnerable while actually being under constant surveillance." Emma nodded, determination replacing fear. "Let's do it. Let's end this nightmare." The plan came together over the next 2 days with surprising efficiency. The village of Hrafnsfjordur initially viewed by Marcus as a security liability due to its remoteness, revealed itself to be an ideal setting for their operation. Mayor Katrin Sigurdsdottir, a pragmatic woman in her 60s who had initially regarded Emma's presence with suspicion, now became a vital ally, mobilizing the community with quiet authority. "Everyone has their assignment," she informed Marcus, during a meeting in the village's small community center. The room contained an unlikely alliance: Marcus's security team, local fishermen, the town's only police officer, and several elderly residents, including Margaret. "The perimeter will be monitored continuously. Any stranger entering our jurisdiction will be noted and tracked." Marcus nodded approvingly at the hand-drawn maps covering one wall, showing sightlines, potential hiding places, and observation points. "Your people know the terrain better than any surveillance technology." "We have lived here all our lives," Mayor Sigurdsdottir replied simply. "The land speaks to us in ways your machines cannot hear." Emma, sitting beside Margaret, felt a surge of gratitude for these people who had accepted her so completely. "I can't thank you enough for this," she said, addressing the room. "You barely know me, yet you're all taking risks on my behalf." An older fisherman shrugged. "You are one of us now. That is all that matters. Besides," Daniel Olson added from his position near the door, "Iceland has a long tradition of offering sanctuary to those in need. We won't break that tradition now." The operational plan was elegantly simple. Emma would maintain her regular routines: morning walks on the beach, visits to the village, tea with Margaret, but now under constant surveillance from both Marcus's team and local observers. Key locations were subtly fortified, communication protocols established, emergency responses rehearsed. The most controversial element, one that Marcus initially resisted, was using Emma's cottage as the central lure. "It's too isolated," he argued, during planning. "Too difficult to secure completely." "But that is precisely why it will work," Margaret countered. "This man believes Emma is vulnerable there. He will be drawn to it." In the end, a compromise was reached. Emma would stay in the cottage during daylight hours only, returning to the more easily secured community center at night. Hidden cameras would monitor the cottage continuously, while Marcus's team maintained covert surveillance from nearby positions. With preparations complete, there was nothing to do but wait. The waiting proved to be the most difficult part. Days, passing in a strange limbo of hypervigilance and routine. Emma continued her weaving, the repetitive motion providing calm amidst the storm of uncertainty. Her wall hanging grew, its pattern evolving beyond her initial design into something more complex, more personal. "Your emotions are weaving themselves into the fabric," Margaret observed during a supervised visit to Emma's cottage. "See how the colors darken here, then lighten as you moved through your fear. The textile remembers what your hands felt." Emma studied the uneven pattern with new eyes. "I never thought of it as a record of my emotional state." "All true creation is," Margaret said, running gnarled fingers over the woven threads. "This is why machine-made things lack soul. They have no memory of the maker's heart." On the 5th day of their operation, as Emma worked at her loom beside the large window overlooking the sea, her secure phone buzzed with an alert from Marcus. "Movement detected on North Path. Stay inside. Team responding." Emma's heart raced. As she carefully set aside her weaving and moved away from the window as instructed. Through her earpiece, she could hear the terse communications of Marcus's team as they tracked the approaching figure. Subject is male, approximately 6 feet, tall, wearing dark clothing and hiking gear, reported one voice. "Approaching from the village direction." "Visual confirmation," Marcus requested. "Not yet. Subject is keeping to covered areas." Emma moved to the designated safe position, a small alcove between the kitchen and back bedroom that offered protection. while maintaining access to the rear exit if needed. Her fingers trembled slightly as she sent a prearranged text to trigger the village's alert system. Through her earpiece, she heard Mayor Sigurdsdottir's calm voice. All positions activated. Northern Harbor Team has visual on approach path. More voices joined the communication network as village observers reported from their positions. Emma was struck by the efficiency with which these fishermen and shopkeepers had adapted to security protocols, further evidence of the Icelandic capacity for practical problem-solving. Subject is approaching cottage perimeter, came another update. Behavior indicates surveillance rather than direct approach, appears to be photographing the property. Maintain distance but prepare to intercept, Marcus instructed. We need positive identification before acting. Minutes stretched like hours as Emma waited, every sense heightened. Through the cottage's thick walls she could hear nothing of what was happening outside, relying entirely on the voices in her ear for information. Subject is moving to eastern approach, reported a new voice. Daniel's, she realized. He appears to be circling the property. Can you get visual confirmation? Marcus pressed. Working on it. The tension built until Emma thought she might scream from the pressure. Then, suddenly, a flurry of activity erupted in her earpiece. Subject. Spotted. It's him. Matches the photograph. All teams converge. Do not lose visual. He's running, heading toward the cliff path. Emma stood, instinctively moving toward the door before catching herself. Marcus's instructions had been explicit. Remain in position regardless of what she heard. Subject is cornered at the cliff edge, came Daniel's voice, breathless with exertion. Marcus, we've got him. All teams maintain positions. Approach with caution. Subject may be armed. What followed was a confused jumble of voices, shouts, and activity that Emma could only partially follow through her earpiece. The minutes dragged by until finally Marcus's voice cut through the chaos. Subject secured. Repeat, subject secured. Emma, stay in position until I give all clear. It was another 20 minutes before Marcus himself appeared at the cottage door, his normally composed expression showing signs of both tension and relief. We've got him, he confirmed as Emma emerged from her hiding place. James Reynolds. Positive identification confirmed. Is everyone all right? Was anyone hurt? No injuries. He attempted to flee along the cliff path but was intercepted by Daniel and 2 of our team members. He's currently detained in the village hall under guard. Emma sank onto a chair, the adrenaline that had sustained her suddenly draining away. It's really over? The immediate threat is neutralized, Marcus qualified. Local authorities are arranging transport to Reykjavik, where he'll face charges related to stalking, harassment, and crossing national borders with false documentation. Can I see him? The question surprised even Emma herself. Marcus's expression hardened. Absolutely not. There's nothing to be gained from direct contact. I need to understand, Marcus. I need to see the man who's been terrorizing me for months. Understanding obsession isn't possible, Emma. Men like Reynolds construct elaborate fantasies that have nothing to do with reality. Meeting you would only feed that fantasy. Emma nodded reluctantly, knowing he was right but still feeling an irrational need for closure that only confrontation might provide. What happens now? She asked instead. We maintain security protocols until Reynolds is safely in custody in Reykjavik. After that, Marcus hesitated. After that, decisions are yours to make. The implications hung in the air between them. With the threat removed, Emma's reasons for remaining in isolation were greatly diminished. The world beyond Hrafnsfjordur, her career, her obligations, her public life, waited for her return. Yet, as she looked around the small cottage that had become her sanctuary, at the half-finished weaving on the loom by the window, at the journal of her grandmother's that had led her here, Emma wasn't sure she was ready to leave. "Can I have some time to think about next steps?" she asked quietly. Marcus nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Take all the time you need. The immediate crisis is resolved. What follows is entirely your choice." As Marcus departed to oversee Reynolds' processing, Emma stepped outside onto the small porch of her cottage. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the landscape, the sea below reflecting light in dazzling patterns. For the first time in months, she stood in the open without fear, without the constant sensation of being watched. Freedom, she realized, felt both exhilarating and strangely daunting. The future, once again, was hers to shape. The community celebration in the village hall had an air of both victory and farewell. 2 days after James Reynolds' capture and transfer to custody in Reykjavik, the people of Hrafnsfjordur gathered to mark what they viewed as a collective triumph. Tables groaned under the weight of traditional Icelandic dishes, fermented shark that Emma politely declined, smoked lamb she found surprisingly delicious, and various fish preparations that showcase the village's primary industry. Emma sat, beside Margaret at the head table, a position of honor that reflected her newfound status within the community. Mayor Sigurdsdóttir had just concluded a speech in Icelandic, which Daniel had loosely translated for Emma's benefit, a stirring declaration about the village's proud tradition of protecting those who sought sanctuary on their shores. She said, "That you are now written into our saga," Daniel added with a smile, "which is high praise from an Icelander. Our sagas are our most precious cultural treasure." Emma looked around at the gathered villagers, fishermen, shopkeepers, artisans, and their families, all of whom had mobilized to protect a stranger in their midst. The depth of her gratitude felt almost impossible to express. "I wish I could thank everyone properly," she said to Daniel. "My Icelandic is still limited to about 10 words, most of them having to do with weather or fish." "They understand," he assured her. "In Iceland, actions speak louder than words anyway." As the celebration continued, Emma found herself in conversation with various villagers, many of whom she had barely spoken with during her weeks of self-imposed isolation. She learned of family histories stretching back generations, of children studying in Reykjavik who returned for holidays, of concerns about climate change affecting fishing stocks, and hopes for developing sustainable tourism to bolster the local economy. Mayor Sigurdsdóttir approached as the evening was winding down, her usual pragmatic demeanor softened by the festive atmosphere. "Your security man tells me you may be staying longer than originally planned," she said without preamble. Emma nodded. "If that's all right with the village, I found something here I didn't expect to find. Peace? That, yes, but also a connection. To my grandmother's history, to a different way of living." Emma hesitated. "I'm not ready to return to my old life just yet." The mayor nodded thoughtfully. "The cottage is yours by right. You may stay as long as you wish." A small smile creased her weathered face. "Though I should warn you that, in another month, the summer tourists begin to arrive. Our population doubles, and the midnight sun makes sleeping difficult for those not accustomed to it. I'll invest in blackout curtains," Emma promised. Later, walking back to the cottage with Marcus at a respectful distance behind her, Emma felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in months. The decision to extend her stay hadn't been made lightly. Thomas had practically howled with frustration during their secure video call, listing the opportunities she was missing and obligations she was postponing. Yet, for perhaps the first time in her adult life, Emma was making a choice based solely on her own needs rather than external expectations. "You're sure about this?" Marcus asked as they reached the cottage. "Security protocols will need adjustment for a longer-term arrangement." "I'm sure," Emma confirmed, "at least for the next few months. After that," she shrugged. "After that, we'll see." Marcus nodded, his professional manner unable to completely mask his personal approval. "I'll make the necessary arrangements. The security team will withdraw to minimal presence. 1 person in the village, rotating duties. I'll return to London but remain available as needed. Thank you, Marcus, for everything. He allowed himself a small smile. Just doing my job, Miss Watson. I think after all this you could call me Emma. Perhaps, in time. His expression turned serious again. One more thing. The authorities in Reykjavik have completed their initial assessment of Reynolds. They've found evidence on his devices that suggests he was planning more than surveillance. The situation was more dangerous than we initially thought. Emma absorbed this information with a calm that surprised her. But it's over now. It is. Reynolds will face serious charges in both Iceland and the UK. Given the evidence collected, a conviction is virtually assured. Marcus hesitated. However, I would recommend maintaining certain precautions. Old habits of security are worth preserving, even in paradise. After Marcus departed the next morning, Emma settled into a new routine. With the immediate threat removed, she ventured further from the village, exploring the dramatic Icelandic landscape with Daniel occasionally serving as guide. She discovered hidden waterfalls, fields of lupine flowers that appeared like purple lakes amid the black volcanic soil, and ancient lava formations that local folklore populated with hidden people and trolls. Her weaving progressed, the wall hanging taking on complex patterns that reflected her evolving relationship with this place. Under Margaret's tutelage, she attempted increasingly difficult techniques, failing often but finding satisfaction in the process of learning. You are too focused on the result, Margaret chided during one particularly frustrating session. The beauty is in the making, not just the finished piece. That's a difficult concept for someone raised in a results-oriented culture, Emma admitted, unraveling a section to begin again. Ah, but you are not in that culture now, Margaret reminded her. Here, time moves differently. The process matters, as much as the outcome. This philosophy gradually permeated other aspects of Emma's life. She began journaling each evening, inspired by her grandmother's example, recording not just events but impressions, emotions, and emerging ideas. She read voraciously from the small but eclectic collection of books in the cottage, supplemented by loans from village residents. Most significantly, she began writing her long-delayed memoir, not the celebrity autobiography her publisher had envisioned, but something more honest, more reflective on the nature of fame and identity in the modern world. The book is writing itself, she explained to Daniel during a walk along the cliffs 3 weeks after Reynolds' capture. I just need to get out of its way. Daniel nodded, understanding this creative process from his own film studies. The best art often feels that way, like discovery rather than creation. Their friendship had deepened during the weeks following the village's unified action against Reynolds. Emma found in Daniel a kindred spirit, someone who understood both the wider world beyond Hrafnsfjordur and the unique value of this remote community. His decision to return from London to help his aging father with the family fishing business resonated with Emma's own growing questions about purpose and belonging. "Do you ever regret coming back?" she asked as they paused to watch seabirds wheeling above the cliffs. Daniel considered the question thoughtfully. "Sometimes I miss the energy of a city, the constant stimulation. But there's something to be said for a life where your work directly sustains your community, where you can see the tangible results of your efforts." "That's what I've lost, I think," Emma mused. "The connection between effort and meaning. Everything became so abstract. Films that took years to complete, causes that showed progress in decades rather than days, a public persona that felt increasingly disconnected from my actual self. And here? Have you found that connection again?" Emma smiled, gesturing to the village below them, where tiny figures moved about their daily business. "I'm getting there. The weaving helps. It's physical, immediate. The writing, too, though in a different way. I feel like I'm recovering pieces of myself that got lost along the way." As June bloomed into July, the village character transformed with the arrival of the summer season. Though far from a major tourist destination, Hrafnsfjordur attracted a steady stream of visitors, mostly serious hikers, photographers, and those seeking authentic experiences away from Iceland's more popular attractions. Emma had initially worried that increased traffic would lead to recognition and the end of her privacy, but the village's protective attitude extended to these interactions. A subtle system operated whereby visitors were gently steered away from her cottage and given polite non-answers to any questions about the English woman staying in their midst. On those occasions when she was recognized, inevitable given her global fame, Emma found most people respectfully maintained their distance after the initial moment of surprise. A few requested photographs or autographs, which she graciously provided while local residents hovered protectively nearby. "Your celebrity is good for business," Mayor Sigurdsdottir observed during one of their now regular meetings to discuss village affairs. "The cafe reports record sales, and Margaret has sold more textiles in the past month than the previous 6 combined." "I'm glad to be contributing something," Emma replied. "I've been thinking about ways to give back more substantially." "Oh." The mayor raised an eyebrow, instantly alert to possibilities for her community. "My grandmother's journal mentions an arts collective that once operated here, in the 1970s, I believe. What happened to it?" "Ah, the Hrafnsfjordur Arts Collective." The mayor nodded. "It was quite famous in Icelandic artistic circles for a time. Artists from Reykjavik and beyond would come for summer residencies, creating work inspired by our landscape and traditional crafts. It dissolved in the early 1990s when funding disappeared and the founder passed away." "That's a shame. It sounds like exactly the kind of initiative that could bring sustainable activity to the village." Mayor Sigurdsdottir studied Emma with newfound interest. "Are you proposing to revive it?" "I might be," Emma admitted, "if there would be community support for such a project. I believe there would be considerable interest. We have the buildings. The old collective workspace still stands, though it's used for storage now. We have local artistic traditions through Margaret and others." The mayor's practical mind was already assessing possibilities. "What we've lacked is connection to the wider artistic world and, frankly, the financial resources to establish something sustainable, both of which I might be able to help with," Emma suggested. "Indeed." Mayor Sigurdsdottir allowed herself a small smile. "Perhaps you would consider presenting this idea at our next community council meeting. Margaret would be particularly interested, I think." The seed planted during that conversation grew rapidly. Emma found herself energized by the prospect of creating something lasting in this place that had offered her sanctuary. She spent evenings researching similar artist residency programs around the world, making notes on best practices and potential pitfalls. During her daily weaving sessions with Margaret, she cautiously introduced the topic. "An arts collective?" Margaret's eyes lit with recognition. "Yes, I remember the original well. My husband was involved. His paintings were influenced by the modern artists who came. It was a good time for the village. New ideas, new energy." "Would you support its revival?" Emma asked. "With my whole heart," Margaret declared. "These traditions need new blood, new interpretations. Without that, they become museum pieces rather than living arts." Emma's vision for the project expanded through these conversations. She began to see possibilities beyond a simple residency program. Perhaps educational components connecting Icelandic youth with traditional crafts, sustainability initiatives focusing on local materials, exhibitions that could draw cultural tourism during the brief summer season. Daniel, too, became an enthusiastic supporter when she shared her developing ideas during their increasingly frequent walks. "I studied film, but I've always been interested in documentary work," he admitted. "A program like this could create opportunities for recording and preserving local knowledge before it's lost. The fishing techniques my father knows, The weather prediction methods, the oral histories, these deserve documentation. Emma nodded eagerly. Exactly. It wouldn't just be about bringing outside artists in, but also about celebrating and preserving what's already here. My father would say you're becoming dangerously Icelandic in your thinking, Daniel teased, always looking backward and forward simultaneously. The community council meeting where Emma formally presented her idea was held in the village hall on a rare, clear evening when sunlight streamed through the windows well past 9 o'clock. Nearly every adult resident attended, creating a fuller house than the hall had seen outside of holiday celebrations. Standing before them, Emma felt a nervousness different from anything she'd experienced in her acting career. These were no longer strangers, but people whose good opinion mattered to her personally. "I came to Hrafnsfjörður seeking sanctuary," she began, her voice steady despite her anxiety. "What I found was much more community, purpose, connection to my own family history through my grandmother's experiences here." She gestured to the journal that now rarely left her side. "In return for the protection and privacy you've all provided, I'd like to propose a project that might benefit the village for years to come." As she outlined her vision for a revived arts collective, a residential program bringing artists from various disciplines to work alongside local craftspeople, learning from traditions while bringing fresh perspectives, Emma watched the faces of her audience. There was interest, certainly, but also the healthy skepticism of a community that had weathered many hardships and learned to evaluate proposals with pragmatic care. "Questions and concerns are welcome," she concluded. This would be a community initiative, not something imposed from outside. It would succeed only with your support and involvement. The discussion that followed was lively and substantive. Practical matters dominated: building renovations, funding mechanisms, seasonal considerations, impact on village resources. Mayor Sigurdsdottir moderated with characteristic efficiency, ensuring all voices were heard while maintaining focus. Margaret spoke powerfully in favor, her status as the village's most respected artist lending weight to her endorsement. "For too long, we have watched our young people leave for opportunities elsewhere. This could create reasons for them to return, to see value in our traditions while building something new." By meeting's end, no formal decision had been reached, but the mood was decidedly positive. A working committee was formed to develop the proposal further, with Emma, Margaret, Daniel, and 3 other residents volunteering to serve. As the meeting disbanded, Emma found herself surrounded by villagers offering suggestions, sharing memories of the original collective, and expressing cautious optimism about the future. The sense of belonging that washed over her in that moment was unexpected and powerful. This remote place that had initially represented escape now felt increasingly like home. Later that night, alone in her cottage, Emma added to her journal. "Today marked a turning point, from taking sanctuary to putting down roots. I can't predict how long this chapter will last, but for now, Hrafnsfjörður feels right in ways London never did. The greatest irony: I fled here to hide, only to find myself more visible, more present than I've been in years. Not as Emma Watson, actress, but simply as Emma, a person contributing to a community that values practical actions over fame or wealth. The weaving grows more complex daily, both on my loom and in my life. Threads connecting past and present, personal and communal, artistic and practical. I'm no longer simply responding to threats or external pressures. I'm creating something new. My grandmother would understand, I think. Her journal entries from this place speak of similar discoveries. Perhaps seeking sanctuary is part of our shared inheritance, along with the need to eventually transform refuge into home. August brought the midnight sun's gradual retreat, nights lengthening by increments as summer began its slow surrender to autumn. For Emma, the changing light marked not just seasonal transition but personal evolution as well. What had begun as temporary refuge had transformed into purposeful residence, with no fixed departure date on the horizon. The Arts Collective project, now officially named the Hrafnsfjordur Creative Heritage Initiative, had progressed from concept to concrete planning. The working committee met twice weekly in the village hall. Their discussions focused increasingly on practical implementation rather than theoretical possibilities. Today found Emma and Daniel inside the abandoned collective building itself, a key, spacious former fish processing facility that had been converted for artistic use in the 1970s before falling into disuse. Sunlight streamed through dusty windows, illuminating a cavernous interior with peeling paint and the faint outlines where equipment had once stood. "It needs work," Daniel acknowledged, making notes on his tablet as they walked the perimeter. "But the structure is sound according to the engineer's assessment. The roof will need reinforcement before winter, and the electrical systems require complete updating." Emma nodded, visualizing the space transformed. "We could retain the open plan for the main work area, but create flexible partitions for different disciplines. Maybe a dedicated ceramics section near the old loading dock where ventilation is best. And the upper level could be converted to individual studios and living quarters for residents," Daniel suggested, pointing to the metal staircase leading to what had once been administrative offices. Their planning session was part of a larger momentum that had swept the village since the community council had formally endorsed the project 3 weeks earlier. Emma had committed significant personal resources as seed funding, but equally important was the groundswell of local support. Residents volunteering labor, expertise, and materials to reduce costs and accelerate the timeline. "The mayor says construction permits should be approved by next week," Daniel reported as they exited the building into the brightness of midday. "If we can secure the roof before the autumn storms, interior work can continue through winter." Emma pulled her light jacket closer as the ever-present Icelandic wind swept across the harbor. "We're really doing this, aren't we? It's starting to feel real." Daniel smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "Did you doubt it would happen?" "Not exactly doubt. But projects like this have a way of remaining theoretical. Plans that never quite materialize." Emma gazed across the harbor where fishing boats bobbed at their moorings. "I've been involved with many initiatives over the years. Some succeeded, others faded away despite good intentions." "This is different," Daniel said with conviction. "You're not just lending your name or making donations from a distance. You're here, doing the actual work." They walked together toward the cafe where the full committee would soon gather, their comfortable silence the product of deepening friendship. Emma had found in Daniel not just a project partner, but a kindred spirit. Someone who understood both the world she had temporarily left behind and the one she was now embracing. At the cafe, they found Margaret already holding court, her walking stick propped against the chair as she spread sketches across the table. At 78, her energy for the project outpaced many younger contributors, her artistic vision honed by decades of practice. "These are my thoughts for the weaving studio," she announced as Emma and Daniel joined her. "North-facing windows, for proper light, storage for looms and materials, display area for finished works." Emma studied the sketches with admiration. Though Margaret had no formal architectural training, her drawings displayed an intuitive understanding of how creative spaces should function. "These are excellent," she praised. "Would you be willing to share them with the architect when she visits next week?" Margaret waved a dismissive hand. "Of course, that is why I made them. Pretty pictures are useless unless they become real things." As other committee members arrived, Mayor Sigurdsdóttir, the local schoolteacher who had volunteered to coordinate educational programming, and the owner of the general store who had unexpected experience in grant writing, Emma felt again that sense of belonging that had grown stronger with each passing week. Their meeting progressed efficiently, with updates on fundraising, promising, construction timelines, ambitious but feasible, and outreach to artistic communities in Reykjavik and beyond, generating significant interest. The project that had begun as Emma's tentative proposal had become a community endeavor, with leadership increasingly distributed among local residents. "I've had another inquiry from that BBC documentary team," Mayor Sigurd's daughter noted near the meeting's end, glancing at Emma. "They're quite persistent about filming the project's development." Emma sighed, recognizing the inevitable tension between her desire for privacy and the practical benefits of publicity for the initiative. "What does everyone think? It would certainly raise the profile of the collective, potentially attracting more funding and higher-caliber artists. But at what cost to your peace?" Margaret asked bluntly. "You came here to escape such attention." "I did," Emma acknowledged, "but perhaps it's time to engage with the world again, on my own terms." The discussion that followed was thoughtful, weighing various considerations with the pragmatic approach that Emma had come to appreciate in her Icelandic neighbors. No decision was reached immediately. Another cultural trait she had adopted, the unwillingness to rush important choices. After the meeting dispersed, Emma found herself walking the now familiar path to her cottage alone, her thoughts churning with the day's developments. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the landscape, the quality of light already showing subtle shifts toward autumn. Inside her cottage, Emma moved immediately to the loom positioned before the main window. The wall hanging that had begun as a novice exercise had evolved into something far more significant, a visual diary of her months in Iceland. The lower portion showed her early attempts, uneven and hesitant. The middle sections gained confidence, incorporating traditional Icelandic patterns that Margaret had taught her. The most recent work displayed increasing originality, patterns of Emma's own design that drew inspiration from her surroundings while expressing her personal aesthetic. She worked for an hour, finding meditative calm in the rhythmic movement of shuttle through warp threads. The physical act of weaving had become a necessary counterbalance to the intellectual and organizational demands of the collective project, a time when her mind could quiet and her hands could create without conscious planning. A gentle knock at the door interrupted her flow. Stretching cramped shoulders, Emma called, "Come in." Margaret entered, carrying a covered basket that emitted enticing aromas. "I brought dinner," she announced without preamble. "You've been forgetting to eat properly again." Emma smiled, recognizing the truth in this observation. "Thank you. I lose track of time when I'm weaving." "As you should," Margaret approved, setting the basket on the small dining table and unpacking containers of homemade fish stew, bread, and a jar of lingonberry jam. "The weaving is going well. You've developed your own voice more quickly than I expected." Coming from Margaret, this constituted high praise indeed. Emma joined her at the table, suddenly aware of her hunger. "I had a good teacher." "Pa!" Margaret waved away the compliment. "I showed you techniques. The art comes from within you." They ate in companionable silence for a time, the simple food satisfying in the way that meals earned through physical and mental exertion often are. Through the window, the view that had initially represented escape to Emma now symbolized connection. To this place, these people, and increasingly to herself. It was Margaret who noticed it first. "You've been using that same blue thread for a while now," she said one afternoon, eyes narrowed at the growing tapestry on Emma's loom. "The spool's almost finished." Emma glanced at the cone of soft indigo wool and shrugged. "I like the tone. It reminds me of the sea just before dusk." Margaret didn't respond immediately. She rose instead and walked to the shelf where she kept supplies, sorting through the cones of dyed wool until she found another, nearly identical in hue. She handed it to Emma with a curious look. "Where did you say you got that thread?" "It came in the last shipment from Reykjavik. Elsa picked it up with my groceries." Margaret frowned, then turned back to her basket without another word. But that frown lingered in Emma's mind long after she'd gone. It was rare for Margaret to question anything directly. When she did, it meant something wasn't sitting right. That night, Emma pulled out the package of supplies from Reykjavik. A receipt was folded neatly on top. Groceries, cleaning products, the thread. Nothing unusual. Still, her stomach turned. She retrieved the shipping box and examined the inside more carefully. At the very bottom, beneath a false flap in the cardboard, something rustled. Her fingers trembled as she pried the panel away. A small envelope lay hidden inside. She stared at it for a long moment before sliding it open. Inside was a single Polaroid photo, her cottage from the outside, taken through a long lens. It had been taken the day before yesterday. A second photo showed her and Margaret through the cottage window, heads bent together in conversation. No note. No return address. Only the photographs. By dawn, Marcus was back in Hrafnsfjordur. The hidden envelope confirmed what he had feared. Someone had infiltrated the village's secure delivery chain. The box came from the regular courier. Emma told him as they huddled in the community center with Mayor Sigurdsdottir and Daniel. "We've used him for weeks." "Which makes him a prime vulnerability," Marcus said, teeth clenched. "This isn't Reynolds. He's in custody. This is someone else." Mayor Sigurdsdottir folded her arms, face pale. "Someone working." "With him? Or someone worse," Marcus said. "Someone who's gone unnoticed, embedded." Emma's throat dried. "Are you saying someone here?" No one answered immediately, but the silence screamed confirmation. Over the next 2 days, Marcus quietly reviewed footage from all known access points. The team uncovered something chilling. A figure in a maintenance uniform who had arrived on the last supply boat. A man none of the villagers recognized. He had lingered near the post office, carried parcels, spoken to no one. Then vanished. He was never part of the ship manifest, Marcus said, showing Emma the footage. He came ashore, dropped off the box, with your supplies, and slipped away. How could no one notice? The supply ship was chaotic that day. Multiple deliveries, some tourists. He exploited the disorder. Emma leaned in, frowning at the grainy image. "Wait. Pause it. Go back 10 seconds. Marcus complied. She stared hard at the man's stance. His frame. The shape of his hands. There was something wrong with his left hand. A tremor. "Can you zoom?" Marcus did. The man's left hand clutched his satchel too tightly, fingers crooked, rigid. Emma's blood ran cold. That hand. It's deformed. His index finger doesn't bend. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Why is that familiar? Because Emma reached into her bag and pulled out the earliest letter from Reynolds. In one of these, he mentioned being injured in a car accident when he was 20. Broke his hand. Said he typed using voice commands now. Marcus stared at the screen. That's not Reynolds. He's still in custody. Emma met his gaze. Then who the hell is it? Marcus dug deeper. A review of Reynolds' devices, until now believed to be fully catalogued, revealed a hidden partition. Inside it, encrypted files, dozens of them. The timestamps were recent, some from after Reynolds' arrest. A digital breadcrumb trail suggesting communication with another party. Someone who was not just an admirer, someone who was a partner. Marcus, decoded enough to uncover a name. Caleb Wynne, a former graduate student under Reynolds at Cambridge, expelled for erratic behavior and suspected academic misconduct. His thesis, Emma discovered, had been about narrative embodiment in celebrity projection, a chilling academic euphemism for obsessive identity dissolution. Caleb hadn't disappeared. He had gone underground, and he wasn't just watching her. He was studying her, becoming her. The village responded with quiet terror. "We sheltered you," the mayor said during an emergency council meeting. "We swore to protect you. and now someone has slipped past all of us. Emma stood up. This isn't your fault. I chose to stay. I chose to fight this, and I still do. But Caleb Wynne isn't like Reynolds, Marcus warned. Reynolds was a stalker. Caleb is something else. He's methodical, unhinged. He believes he's part of your story. And if I run again? Emma asked. Marcus looked grave. Then he'll follow. It was Elsa, Margaret's granddaughter, who delivered the final blow. She had recently treated a patient for frostbite, a man claiming to be a hiker who had gotten lost in the highlands. I thought he was odd, she said to Emma privately. Educated accent. Refused to give a full name. Said he was observing migratory rhythms of human isolation. I thought he was joking. Now I'm not so sure. Emma's heart pounded. How long ago? 2 days before the photograph arrived. Caleb was already here, already watching. The final twist came late one night as Emma, unable to sleep, returned to her loom. Her fingers, moving by muscle memory, tugged at a knot in the back of the tapestry, one she hadn't noticed before. It wasn't part of her work. It had been tied deliberately, one thread looping against another in a pattern her grandmother had called flocker, min or my mark, a subtle way Icelandic weavers sometimes signed their work. But Emma hadn't used it. Only Margaret knew the design. Hands shaking, Emma turned the loom and followed the thread with her eyes. It wasn't hers at all. Someone had altered her tapestry. Threaded. Through her work was a second narrative. A woven message, faint and nearly imperceptible unless you knew what to look for. In Icelandic runes, ancient and formal. She translated it slowly, breath-catching with every word. I am inside your story, now. You cannot weave me out. Emma didn't sleep the night she discovered the hidden message. She sat before her loom until dawn, the light shifting from gray to gold through the wide windows as the sea continued its ancient monologue. The message ran through her mind on a loop. I am inside your story now. You cannot weave me out. She turned the phrase over again and again, trying to absorb what it meant, not just literally, but symbolically. Caleb Wynne had managed to touch the most intimate corner of her new life, her art, her peace, and he had done it unnoticed. When Marcus returned that morning from patrolling the cliffs, she met him at the door. He's already been inside the cottage, she said before he could speak. Marcus's entire body tensed. What? She stepped aside and gestured to the loom. He crossed the room swiftly, eyes scanning the tapestry. She showed him the thread, the runes. Jesus Christ, he muttered. It's not just surveillance now, Emma said quietly. It's a message. A violation. Marcus turned to her, jaw tight. This changes everything. We move to Level 2 protocol. Secure the perimeter. No one enters or exits the cottage alone. And Emma, I'm not leaving, she said before he could finish. Marcus didn't argue this time. The community reconvened that afternoon. Word spread fast, as it always did in Hrafnsfjordur, and by the time Emma arrived at the village hall with Marcus, Daniel and Margaret, the room was already packed. Mayor Katrin Sigurdsdottir stood at the front, face grave. We have lived through storms, she said. We have buried our dead in frozen soil and pulled our children from sinking boats. But what we face now is not nature's fury. It is human darkness. Murmurs passed through the room. Emma stepped forward. This is my problem, she said. But I'm asking for your help, again. Not because I want you to risk anything for me, but because this man has made your home his hunting ground. He's invaded our peace. I want to end this. Here. Together. An older woman in the back stood. You stood with us when the fish stopped coming. You helped restart the Arts Collective. You became one of us. The mayor nodded. And no one, Stalks one of our own without consequence. Marcus and Daniel began coordinating village patrols, mapping vantage points with military precision. Volunteers came forward, retired sailors, teenagers with drones, the schoolteacher who knew how, to navigate the ravines. The community split into rotating teams: observation, support, and emergency response. The weaving studio became command central, its walls now covered in aerial photographs, grids, and walkie-talkie call signs. Emma trained too. Marcus taught her defensive techniques, how to recognize patterns in surveillance, how to use emergency, flares, and distress codes. "If you panic, you lose," he told her during a drill. "Stay alert, stay calm, stay alive." Margaret, watching from the doorway, added, "And never let him rewrite your story. You own the thread." The trap was designed as theater. Emma would resume her routine: the beach walks, the weaving sessions, a planned solo hike to the waterfall, publicized quietly among tourists to attract attention. But she would never be alone. Hidden observers would watch her every move. The hiking route would be flanked by observers in camouflage, drone surveillance, and thermal cameras borrowed from the Coast Guard. Marcus embedded himself in the trees. Daniel stayed near the summit. The goal was to draw Caleb out, let him believe she was vulnerable, isolated. A woman still weaving under the illusion of safety. Days passed. No sign. The psychological toll mounted. Emma dreamed of runes in blood, of hands reaching through her loom, pulling the threads backward, of Reynolds and Caleb both staring at her from the crowd as she accepted an award, their faces expressionless. She awoke one morning to find Margaret in the kitchen, boiling herbs. "Dream tea," she said. "We used it in the old days. Helps keep the shadows at bay." Emma sipped it, grateful. On the 10th day of the operation, the break came. At 4:17 a.m., the drone team picked up the movement near the cliff road. A man, alone, moving quickly, hooded, carrying a pack. He matched the build of the mystery hiker from Elsa's clinic. Marcus issued the command: "Shadow only. Do not engage." The man passed 3 observation points without reacting. He cut through a sheep pasture, crossed the stream below the waterfall trail, and then he stopped, he turned, and looked directly into one of the hidden cameras. Then he smiled, a direct message. He knew the village held its breath. Caleb disappeared. Again. But that night, Emma received a new letter, not delivered to the cottage, not sent through the post. It was inside her grandmother's journal, inserted between pages she'd already read. He'd been inside again. The note was short. "You can set the stage. You can cast the roles. But I wrote the ending. I always have." It was signed with a drawing. A single rune. The same rune woven into the base of her tapestry. The one she hadn't yet discovered. Marcus doubled all patrols. Emma insisted they not cancel the final stage of the trap. "The solo hike. He's challenging us," she said. "He thinks he's smarter, that we're predictable. Let's give him a surprise." Daniel walked her to the trailhead. "You shouldn't have to be brave all the time," he said. Emma squeezed his hand. "But I am, because you all believe I can be." Then she turned and walked into the forest. This time, she carried no phone, only a satellite tracker hidden in her boot, and a knife, just in case. The trail wound upward. The wind was cold, sharp with the scent of pine and sea salt. Emma focused on the rhythm of her steps, the sound of her breath. Each branch creak, each gull cry sent her heart racing, but she pushed forward. At the 3rd switchback, she paused. A figure stood ahead, not moving, waiting. Emma stared at the figure ahead. Her breath caught, and her hand drifted to the knife at her belt. The figure stood still, half shrouded in mist. Not a step forward, not a word spoken. Then, he moved. Slowly, deliberately. Caleb Wynne. He stepped out of the mist like a character exiting the wings of a dark play. His eyes held an unnatural calm, a serenity that made Emma's skin crawl. "It had to be here," he said quietly. "The threads all pointed to this place, the storm, the silence, the loom. I wove it just right." Emma didn't respond. Her mind raced through everything Marcus had drilled into her, the code phrases, the emergency flares, the trackers. "You never understood," Caleb continued, stepping closer. "You're not the protagonist. You're the setting, the tapestry, the landscape in which meaning occurs." Emma stood her ground. Her voice, when she found it, was steady. "And you're what? The author?" Caleb smiled. "The audience, the critic, the one who sees." He stepped closer. The knife felt hot in her hand. Her fingers curled around the handle, hidden by her jacket. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "You're violating the story." He stopped, tilting his head. "But don't you see? I am the story." Before she could answer, Marcus's voice crackled in her earpiece, faint, nearly lost in static. "Emma, hold position. 2 minutes." She needed to stall. "Then tell me," she said. "Tell me why you did all this. Why the letters, the surveillance, the manipulation?" Caleb sighed like a disappointed teacher. "You still don't understand. Those weren't threats. They were invocations. Invitations to clarity." He took another step. Emma took a step back. He watched her, eyes gleaming. "You ran here, to this stitched little corner of forgotten geography, and in doing so, you followed. The pattern? You always do." Another crackle in her earpiece. "Team in place. Say the word." She hesitated. She had to be sure. Had to draw him in just a little more. "So what happens now, Caleb? Do you kill me? Finish the tapestry with blood." He looked genuinely confused. "Why would I kill you? You're the loom. I just want to leave my mark. A single thread, hidden but eternal." Emma took another step back, slowly drawing the knife into the open. "You already left your mark, but you don't get to define it." A rustle in the brush behind Caleb. He didn't turn. "They're coming," Emma said. "You can't win this." Caleb laughed softly. "Winning is irrelevant. There is only the final image." He lunged. Emma dodged, swinging the knife upward as Marcus and Daniel burst from the trees. Caleb tackled her to the ground. She slashed wildly, cutting his arm. Blood spilled onto the moss. He screamed, not in pain, but in ecstasy. Yes, red into the green, the perfect contrast. Marcus pulled him off her, slamming him to the earth. Daniel cuffed his wrists. Caleb thrashed, howled, but did not resist. Emma crawled backward, breath heaving, hands shaking. Caleb turned his head toward her. His mouth moved, soundless now. Just the motion of a name. Emma. Then the forest filled with the sound of helicopters. The extraction was swift. Caleb was sedated, loaded into a secure carrier, and flown directly to a psychiatric facility in Reykjavik. He wouldn't face a traditional trial. His journals, recovered later from a cave near the highlands, were filled with delusions and diagrams of Emma's face woven into cosmic patterns. Marcus debriefed Emma at the village hall. The community waited in tense silence as he confirmed the news. The threat was neutralized. When the words left his mouth, applause broke out, hesitant at first, then swelling to a cheer. Emma sat beside Margaret, the knife still at her hip, hands wrapped in bandages. She felt none of the triumph others did. She felt like she had just killed something she didn't understand. That night, the sky broke into auroras. Emma stood alone on the cliff, watching the green lights twist above the sea. Margaret joined her silently, handing her a cup of dream tea. "It's over," Emma said. Margaret shook her head. It never is. Not really. But we learn to weave again. Emma looked down at her fingers, at the scars forming across her palm, at the threads that had been severed and rejoined. Then I will. She looked to the stars and began again. The days following Caleb Wynn's capture unfolded in strange rhythms, part exhale, part realignment. Emma remained in Hrafnsfjordur as summer ripened and then began its slow descent into the whisper of early autumn. The sun, once eternal in its arc over the sea, began to slip earlier beneath the horizon each evening, gilding the cliffs in bronze. The Arts Collective resumed its meetings within a week. No formal announcement was made. No declarations about normalcy returning. They simply gathered, Margaret, Daniel, Mayor Sigurdsdottir, and the others, around a table once again strewn with sketches, grant applications, and building plans. Emma returned to her loom, the work slower now, but deeper. Her weaving had changed. The color palette darkened at first, blues like the deep fjord before a storm, blood-dark crimsons woven in sparingly. But as the weeks passed, lighter shades returned, sun-washed golds, mossy greens, sea foam. "I used to weave to remember," she told Margaret one evening. "Now, I think I weave to forget, or at least to reorder things." Margaret poured her a cup of tea, nodding. Forgetting is not the goal. The thread changes, that's all. It travels from one shuttle to another, and the pattern evolves. Emma's presence in the village was no longer one of quiet novelty, nor a fragile secret. She was simply Emma. Emma who helped revive the Arts Center, Emma who taught children how to use a basic frame loom, Emma who pulled kelp from the tide pools for dyeing fabric. In early September, Mayor Sigurdsdottir and Daniel invited her to a private gathering in the town's community hall. It had been Daniel's idea. "Just a quiet thank you," he said. "No speeches, just some food, some music, a little fire in the hearth." But when Emma arrived, she found the hall transformed. Tapestries, some hers, some Margaret's, some by children, lined the walls. The central table was covered in fresh fish dishes, rye bread, and pickled everything. At the back, a string quartet from a neighboring village tuned their instruments. Margaret stood near the hearth, a small box in her hand. "For you," she said, offering it. Inside was a brooch, carved of driftwood and silver, shaped like the loom shuttle Emma had used since her arrival. "For the one who learned to weave through fire," Margaret said simply. Emma was too moved to speak. Later, she danced with Daniel. No paparazzi, no clicks of camera shutters. Just fiddles and a hearth and the scent of summer-cured herbs. "I've been thinking," she said as they danced, "about staying." Daniel looked at her. "Staying, as in making this home. Not just hiding here, not just helping, living here. At least for a few years." His hand tightened around hers. "We'd be lucky to have you." By October, the first snow had touched the mountains. The Arts Collective, now fully funded thanks to a grant Emma helped secure, began. Renovations in earnest. Workers from Reykjavik arrived, and the village, for the first time in decades, buzzed with activity. Emma continued writing. The memoir she'd promised her publisher had transformed. It was no longer about a career or even a crisis. It was about sanctuary, silence, and survival. About what it meant to be seen and what it meant to see yourself again. She titled it North Thread. She wrote longhand on thick paper. She edited slowly, deliberately. Each chapter was framed by snippets of her grandmother's journal. The entries became touchstones, bridges between generations of women who had found peace in the same sea, wind. In a section titled The Loom and the Knife, she wrote, "Healing is not linear. It is not a return to the person you were. It is an emergence into someone new, bearing the imprint of pain but not defined by it." I carry his words in my body. Now, but I also carry this place, these people, the woman I became here. In December, Emma returned to London briefly. She met with her publisher, with Thomas, with Marcus. She stood outside her old townhouse and realized she no longer belonged inside it. The city felt louder, harder, but not hostile, just different, like an old costume no longer suited to the role. She gave a quiet press statement, accompanied by a foundation announcement. Emma Watson would be funding rural arts initiatives in isolated communities across Europe, beginning with Iceland. She declined interviews. She returned home to Hrafnsfjörður before the year turned. New Year's Eve, she stood at the edge of the sea once more, a bonfire crackling behind her as the village gathered to celebrate. She thought about her grandmother, about the girl who had fled war and found safety on this very coast. She thought about the child she'd been, Hermione Granger, everyone's clever best friend. She thought about Caleb and James Reynolds, about the shadows that had chased her through cities and dreams, and she thought about the loom, not just the physical one, but the loom of her life. The places, the people, the pain, and the peace, the threads she could now choose to hold or cut, the ones she could finally release. At midnight, the northern lights shimmered into being. Emma whispered a word she hadn't used in years. Home. Daniel came to stand beside her. Margaret joined them, her arm hooked with Elsa's. The village sang softly, a lullaby about winter turning to spring. The fire burned down to embers, and Emma smiled. She had woven something new. The journey of Emma Watson. In this story is fictional, but the themes are very real. The pressures of visibility, the fragility of safety, the strength it takes to rebuild from fear. We are all weavers of our own stories, and sometimes it is in the quietest places that we find the threads we thought we lost. Let this be a story, not of running away, but of running towards something lasting. Let this be a reminder. You are not the trauma you endured. You are the tapestry that rises from it. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.